I haven't worn a tie in like 3 months. So I'm like, for the occasion of a teacher movie, so to speak, I'm like, I'm gonna get in character tonight. So yeah.
Well, I I don't know if this is actually going to make it to YouTube, so we'll see.
Okay.
But I feel like even if it's the audio only version, people will
Yeah.
be able to hear the tie.
They can. Yeah. I mean, this tie. Yeah, definitely can get heard. And yeah, I'm dirtying a perfectly well ironed shirt for this. But hey, I don't have any pants on, so
Well, which is thematically appropriate for tonight's movie.
correct.
Teachers without pants. That's what we'll
Yeah.
call this one.
I'm gonna go wash my bits in the bath before we get going in this show. Yeah.
Here's the thing. I have
Mhm.
not watched Election. Well, let's preface this by saying that this is the latest installment of Reelpolitik, in which every month leading up to the 2020 election, we're talking about a politically themed movie. And right now, we're going to be discussing Alexander Payne's 1999 film Election, starring Matthew Broderick and Reese Witherspoon. So when I haven't watched this movie in a long time. It's probably
Same
been
here.
10 years, right?
Yeah.
And I loved this when it first came out. I mean, I think I was 22 and I saw this a bunch of times in theaters, known it on home video. And the weird thing watching it now is, at the time I was dating a girl who was in high school, which sounds really bad. But fast forward, a couple decades, and we're married for several years and have a couple of great kids. So it all worked out.
Yeah.
But yeah, the strangeness of watching, because as you get older, and I'm sure you feel this way too, as you get into your approaching middle age, and you still got a little bit of time left before that happens.
I'm
But
40. I'm there.
okay, but
Yeah.
well, I hope that's not middle age. I hope middle age for you is like 60,
Oh, if I can live to 80, I'll take it. Let me tell you. So let's just say we're there.
Right. But at a certain point, when you get past like you're into your 30s and beyond, people who are
Mhm.
20 start to look like they're 12, and people who are,
Yeah.
18 look like they're 5. And
Yeah.
so watching a movie in which you've got, high school teachers banging their, sophomore students, you're like,
Whew.
wow, I don't know if
Yeah.
I don't know if I
It
could
was
take this.
shocking then and it's shocking now. As a guy in the profession, yes, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a cringeworthy aspect of this movie that it's a tough mountain to get over for some folks. But I mean, you got to sit back and go, laugh. It's a movie. Laugh. It's a movie. They're not here to completely make fun of and deride the entire profession. So oh yeah.
Well, it's funny because when I asked my wife to watch it with me, she's like, I hate that movie. I'm like, really? I don't remember you having that visceral reaction into it. And she's like, no, I never liked Election. And she did watch it with me, sort of. She was playing on the Nintendo Switch next to me. So she would occasionally like perk her ears up or look at the screen when something was, weird was going on, which was most of the time, admittedly. And by the end of this film, I still love Election, but I understand that there's only two redeeming characters in this entire thing, one of whom is the janitor, I think, who has no
I think
lines.
so. No, no lines, but a
Right.
great look and a good scowl.
Oh, yeah.
I think if
Perfect.
I think I remembered in the notes here, that janitor was an actual school janitor Alexander Payne picked out and said, "You know what? You're perfect. Let me get you in this movie."
That makes sense. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this was Chris Klein's first movie. And
Yes, it was.
wasn't he also, they were location scouting or something,
Hmm.
and they found him as
Yep.
an actual high school
Yep.
student, like,
He's
hey,
an
you ought to be
Omaha.
in pictures. Yeah.
Yeah, Omaha Discovery, and look where he's come now. So yeah, actually, my wife and I are watching Crappy Plug. There's a Netflix show going on right now that's extremely wholesome, uh, probably wincingly wholesome. It's called Sweet Magnolias, about these three ladies in a South Carolina town, kind of getting over their relationships. They're all about the same 40, and who's the divorced husband kind of heel of the show? It's a badly accented, slightly pot-bellied Chris Klein. And I'm like,
Really?
oh geez, yeah, yeah.
Well, that's the weird thing, is because my wife is watching that show right now. It is her new obsession,
It's my wife's new obsession as well.
right?
Which
And
means it's now my new obsession because I'm like, oh, this is kind of fun to watch. And oh, let's see where this goes. And I admit it's entrancing me, and I shouldn't, but it does.
I'll have to maybe catch up with it. I just
Yeah.
She described it to me, and I couldn't get over the idea that it was a remake of Steel Magnolias for some
Oh,
reason. But
is it that? I couldn't tell you if it's that.
no,
Okay, okay.
it's not. We kind of got into a tiff
Yeah,
because we were speaking a different language. But no, I'm just surprised she hasn't mentioned. Maybe she doesn't recognize that it's Chris Klein in the part.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
I showed I mean, for me, he's the American Pie guy, one of many. And it's not that I forgot he was in Election, but it was a pleasant surprise last night to be like, oh yeah, we're gonna get Chris Klein in this one, and he is baby faced compared to where he is now. Like he's got he's showing his age, so currently, so yeah.
yeah. And we'll briefly set up the movie for anyone who hasn't seen Election.
Mm.
We're going to talk about the entire thing. So pause this,
Yeah.
come back
And
to
this
it.
won't all look so ridiculous once you see the movie.
I swear I'd have to go back and look at it again. I just watched it last night, I think, as did you. But is
Mhm.
that actually from Matthew Broderick's wardrobe? Because I'm getting that
Ma-
vibe. That's a Jim McAllister outfit.
These are my shirts and ties, so I'm equally as lame as Mr. McAllister. The real Don, just as bad. Well, I'm not doing the hijinks he's doing. Tempted, don't get me wrong, but yeah. Yeah.
You mean snooping around a backyard and getting stung by bees? That's the only temptation
No,
you're
no,
talking about.
no. I would totally. I would gladly, as a social studies teacher, mishandle an election to forge a result. That part, I watched the movie and go, accurate. Let's do that. Let's go ahead. Now, banging your best friend's wife and snooping around yards and doing hotel rooms. No, 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 thank you on that. Drive a tiny, crappy car and make do with the school facilities. Not that far, but close. So yeah.
Let me ask you about that car because I know nothing about automobiles, but it
That's
really stuck out to me. That is a
yeah.
funny little car. What kind of car is that? Do you know?
It's a Ford. It's got to be an old Ford Fiesta because there's nothing that small that's got a Ford brand on it. I mean, it's not that would be, yeah, I don't know if there's anything smaller than a Fiesta. I love I know it's kind of like our sight gags that we talked about, like with Lovebirds last show. The sight gag for me is the seatbelt that automatically comes over and up, like, ding, 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 ding. It just kind of comes up and locks him in. I'm like, what cars used to ever do that,
I
I had,
I don't know. I remember that vaguely being a
yeah,
thing, possibly only because of this movie, but I wondered why that feature died. You'd think that with everybody wanting ultra convenience nowadays, that would
sure.
be the thing.
Yeah, but it is quite now, as a school teacher, I drive a Chevy Spark, which is a tiny little car. So no, 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 that's us. The low rung public school teacher in a small town who a plebeian citizen who is not treated as a professional. That's a teacher's car, let me tell you. Oh yeah.
Well, it looked like a Lego car. I mean, that's
Oh yeah.
how,
Oh
wow,
yeah.
it's almost conformed to the shape of his body. That's how small this thing is.
Hmm.
But it is, we do open the movie with those weird little details of him kind of living at the school. I mean, he's married, he's got a home life. His wife is, I believe, is a nurse. They're trying to have kids. It's not really working out, but he's such a dedicated
Wait.
educator that we get from his narration, but we also see him like getting up and running around the track and showering at the school, getting dressed, preparing his lessons early. And that's sort of the mirror version of him is this really smart, ambitious student named Tracy Flick, played by Reese Witherspoon,
Mm.
who, when we first meet her, she's at school early, setting up a table to get the nomination for class president. And she's putting packs of juicy fruit gum into a fishbowl, and she's got her signature page and everything laid out.
Hmm.
It's really cute. And you can tell that Jim McAllister, the teacher, tolerates Tracy Flick because he's trying to maintain a level of professional courtesy. But we also find out soon into the movie that it's not just this distance of like teacher student, and it's not just a distance of like annoying teacher student.
Hmm.
It's that she got into a bit of a scandal that was kind of kept hush hush, where she was sleeping with his best friend, who was also a
Yeah.
teacher at the school, who'd been there for over a decade. And it was this really strange little vignette at the beginning that you almost feel like in another movie would have tied more into the story. You would have seen more from that character. But yeah, the teacher was in love, and he was described as the kind of guy who went into the profession because he never wanted to leave school.
Yeah, I know
But
that type as well.
he got caught sending a rather detailed card about how he wanted to run away with
Yeah.
her to Maui or someplace.
Talk about pre-internet, right? That would be a Snapchat today, would it not? Oh boy.
Well, that's the other thing. I had forgotten that the scandal did not rock the school. My remembrance is that everyone kind of knew about it, but no, it was kept hush hush. That's how she was able to kind of run for president and not be scandalized by it. It was almost a threat that McAllister makes to her towards the end of the movie.
Yeah.
About like spilling secrets. So that's fascinating. I don't think maybe you could speak more to this. Is that this kind of scandal, could that be kept under wraps to this degree today?
No, no, this would get destroyed. Whether it's social media, a board meeting, teacher unions, there'd be 1,000 other hurdles and things. Now, I mean, I've heard me some stories in the day, like between small towns and just things that happen and all that. But no, yeah, and especially if this mom is Tracy Flick's mom is this paralegal person who's all up in the law. Like that would be the easiest 1-2 punch thing she could possibly do to blow something up in the way to completely support her daughter. So no, this wouldn't have a chance in hell of not blowing up and blowing out. And yeah, kind of like same way the scandal of the election kind of becomes that tabloidy wire service news story that Jim narrates towards the end. That first one would have got far more blown up. Now, don't get me wrong, they would try to be extremely, anything would try to be discreet in some kind of sort of way, especially if not that there's a lot of amicability there between student and disgraced teacher, but that yeah, that they would be almost, well, the part that would be true, I'll say, is that teacher would be there one day and gone the next day, and you would not hear about it other than whispers and rumors, but those whispers and rumors would get loud in a hurry, then or today.
Yeah, I guess it helps that the only people who are really in the know as far as that particular election scandal, well, I guess it was sort of a wider group towards the end, but I mean, you've got Paul, who's the Chris Klein character, who's the well-meaning but not that well. He's smart, but he's just really really naive, like almost like a country bumpkin character. But it's almost inconsistent because in his narration, he is very worldly in terms of like getting blown by his sister's best friend. It's sort of aw shucks, but then later on they're talking about doing stuff after school in the hot tub. But he's praying to God, and he's very grateful and very humble, and he interacts with people. He's just so friendly and caring that he's not going to say anything, mostly because he's probably not aware of half the stuff that's going on around him most of the time.
Very true.
His sister Tammy, who is a fantastic character, who is she is a lesbian who's trying to figure out her own sexuality and find her way in the world, especially tough in a 1999 small town Nebraska high school. She transfers out to a different school, amongst strange circumstances as well. Tracy, she's not saying anything about this election scandal, really. She's just, using the opportunity to grab power towards the end and move on to bigger and better things outside of that town. So, yeah. And, Jim McAllister, he's disgraced, and he's off running tours for a museum in DC.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And there's a couple of ancillary characters, but I feel like they are they have such integrity, such pride in the election that they're almost embarrassed that it happened.
Right. Let me blowfold myself here for a second. There we go. All right, I can talk to you now.
What was that?
It was the tape that was holding my bee stung eye down. But no, I had the lazy eye, or at least the attempt at the lazy eye here, or the swollen eye. No, this movie is whip crack smart in terms of being able to have this very odd three-way election and all these interchanging parts in a small town, which is very small town. There isn't everybody knows everybody. There is sibling rivalry and all that. There is always, and I can say this as a teacher, no matter where I've worked, I have a Tracy Flick in every class. Every class, every year. I've been a teacher for 19 years. So that's yes, that those types of people are around, and they want everything like that. And so, but no, what I really enjoy about it is those ancillary characters they're not complete hams and stereotypes. Even when they do, there's still a wrinkle of distance and obliviousness where they're there just to serve a little spot but then move on, like the little election officer guy who really is confident he has the count, like he's just a good student trying to do a good thing, and he's, takes his job seriously, but then he gets his little comeback moment to Mr. McAllister at the stoplight in the car where you're like, oh wait, there's more to it there, but not so far that it has to go too much. Even the Metzler parents, like the golfing dad, that's not overly done to the way where it's like Donald Trump Jr. and anything like that. But and his little speech of sending Tammy to Catholic school, it's direct, it's silly, it is farcical, but it is not so over the top that it's something else. Like I think if this was like a Judd Apatow movie or an Adam Sandler movie, this would be dialed way further to 12 and over the top. But all these characters are just so sly, and in the way they shoot the thing as well. The cinematography was I love the snappy editing between close-ups and then distant shots where like you said, just unpacking the gum into a fishbowl. Go ahead and go close just to see the pile of that gum come up and then come back to Tracy Flick, or the way they zoom, or of course those crazy cute freeze frames that kind of frame different little moments for the voiceovers. And I know we've talked about voiceovers before where, can they be overused and can they be too much? This is a movie where it lends itself to it because, if you don't have an inner monologue of where this is all going, you just have these little small town aw shutsy things, and it doesn't show the smartness and the depth behind it. So, yeah, just the movie's wicked smart, and for this to be, and I remember at the time this was such out of left field, like as a 1999 MTV film, a year after Dead Man on Campus. In terms of the lexicon of MTV produced films for Paramount, this one was just so balls in the wall out there. I mean, Alexander Payne and Jim Taylor got a best adapted screenplay nomination for this. Lost, gosh, that was 1999, so it's a crazy year. They lost to I think it's The Cider House Rules. So, which it's an adaptation and a well-loved adaptation as it is. But I mean, that category was The Cider House Rules, Sideways, The Green Mile, The Insider, and Talented Mr. Ripley. Talk about a powerhouse lineup of books. So, yeah, for a little movie like this to come out of nowhere and stand up with those big boys in that big year of a movie, and to have it resonate as it has, because even though this is pre-internet and pre-social media, you can pop this movie in today and just soak up so much social and political commentary, fitting of your theme and fitting of even the politics of school politics. So, yeah.
Yeah, I vaguely remember, probably shortly after the film came out, reading Tom Perrotta's novel that it was based on. I don't remember a whole lot of it, so I can't tell if it's faithful or not faithful. I'm probably going to go out on a limb and say it was faithful enough that it didn't bother me, like, oh, this is completely different or one is better than the other. But yeah, the MTV Films thing, that was kind of a shocker to me when those, before the credits come, like, oh my God, this is an MTV movie. It seems, I can understand because it's a fresh-faced cast, it's a high school movie, but this is so far beyond the sophistication of what I think the MTV audience was back in 1999.
Oh yeah.
That it's great that it broke out and got those nominations. But let me ask, because something that struck me, and I was conscious of the fact that I was talking to you, a high school teacher, about this movie afterwards. There's one montage where I believe it was Tracy was narrating her thoughts on Jim McAllister's life as a teacher. And he's in front of the board. He's like a history and social sciences or social studies teacher. He's talking about on the blackboard the three branches of government, legislative, judicial, and executive. And it keeps fading between him, I guess, year after year. It's the diagram is the same. It keeps shifting positions. He's getting the gray at the temples and all that. And her assumption is that it's repetitive. It's just like a terrible drudgery. But from his point of view, if we're to believe the way he was talking about his career at the beginning of the movie, he just enjoys, he doesn't mind doing that over and over again, because for him, it's sort of a new experience every time with a new crop of students. I know you just said that in your experience, you've got a Tracy Flick every year. So I guess my question to you, and this is sort of outside the scope of the movie, how do you reconcile that? I mean, do you try and
I,
keep things fresh every year? Do you teach the same things year to year? I know
yeah.
you've been to a couple of different, a few different schools in your
Mhm,
career, but
mhm.
how does that transfer? How do you deal with
Oh
that?
man, I admit I feel both of those things. There's things I do that I seek out to be fresh, just to not be stale, because it does get old in a hurry. Although there's a comfort, I'll admit, just from a nuts and bolts standpoint, there's a comfort to knowing what you're going to teach every year, so I don't have to reinvent the wheel every year, because this is a lot of work.
Hmm.
Even this, for example, this e-learning thing that we're all having right now, and I have 2 more weeks of school here, and I have been like over the last few years, I've been with technology becoming greater and greater. I've been getting better and sharper as an old dog trying to learn new tricks and not be an old dog about embracing, technology and not being one of those people who are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're making the kids use computers and screen time. I'm like, well, that's their world. They're using it like crazy away from us. Might as well make them good at it and make what we do good at it too, because someday we're going to need it or they're going to need it. And sure enough, look where we are, where screens are now not just a lifeboat, but the conduit, the answer, in the way. So no, how do I reconcile it? It is different each year with a new batch of kids. That does help. Even though there's a Tracy Flick every time, even though there's a Paul Metzler every time, there's nuances to every kid that help shape it a little bit. There's the people you work for a little bit, like the the motivation you can get from coworkers or a good boss can help a little bit. But I don't know. I think in the room, how I reconcile it is it's still the performance every time. Like there's no better public speaking fear breaker than standing in front of 25 very judgmental, no filtered, opinionated teenagers. Versus like, because I could stand in front of any room with no stage fright right now. Because if I could stay like a room full of adults, if you need me to host the Oscars, zero fear because none of those people are worse than shitty ass kids. So, but
Said
no,
with love, I'm sure. Said with love.
said with
Yes.
love, said with love. I love those little fuckers. Anyway, but no, it's keep little tools and things to make it fresh, but at the same time, um, remember what made it fun, and whatever made it fun for you or made it interesting to you, convey that to the students if you can. If you once you stop doing that, though, yes, this is tedious. I've watched teachers burn out like crazy. I know there's that stat that 40% leave in the first 5 years. That's more from the stress of the job more than the complacency of the job. The veterans that I see give up, or the ones that are just resigned to just eking their way to retirement, are the worst. They're worse than the rookies that don't know anything because they know everything and then just choose not to change or adapt or get better. I try my best to not be that guy, but ooh, I feel both for sure.
Well, what's interesting is that we get that perspective change because you want to believe Jim McAllister when he talks about how passionate he is, but then you could also see Tracy Flick's perspective of a 16-year-old girl who's got these great ambitions. How could anybody be satisfied being a high school teacher in
Yeah,
a small town and just teaching the same thing over and over again? It's a matter of kind of what you want out of life. And
yeah,
if that's really what he wants to do and he feels like he's making a difference, then that is, the reward.
yeah, and I encourage many teachers because in my time of being a teacher, I used to be an instructional coach where I'm that guy coaching up young people and other fellow teachers where the person who makes sure they never feel complacent, the person who helps evaluate that they never feel complacent or that their instruction is always reaching and going and getting somewhere. The number one thing I tell people is those things of like leave work at work. Maybe don't stand there at a copy machine for hours. Maybe don't run the track and do some of these Jim McAllister things or the idea of go get a life. And I know he's married, but they don't have children, but that's what keeps me going is having something other than teaching. Because if all I had was that, and there's so much systemic, how can I say this? Well, all the things you hear, all the crappy parts of this job that you hear about are very true. Like the testing is crappy, the evaluations are crappy, the pay is terrible. If all I had was that, yeah, this would not be fulfilling. But to just do that and not let that run your life, and I get to go home and be a dad. I get to do this movie stuff with you. Like I find other outlets for creative flexibility and muscle. The fact that I have those keeps me sane because if it was just the teaching, you got to absorb a lot of books and snort a lot of lines of crumbled up copier toner. Or I don't I have not met many Jim McAllisters in my life who are just all the job, or if they're all the job, they're 22 years old. They're not 42 years old. So it's hard. I don't know. They got to go have a life beyond it. So Tracy's observation of that, I feel like, isn't all that far off. Like, I know she's maybe she's not coming with a lot of experience. She's really being judgmental about it, but there's a lot of truth there, where if all you have is was that worth all that effort? Or if that's all you have is this supposed hierarchy that you've put yourself on, or this small cloistered popularity, if that's all you got, it is a little sad. So, and I think there's a moment where Jim maybe gets a sense of that, but then kind of doesn't. Like, the Jim we get that's still curating in a museum hasn't learned that lesson, and it probably never will. Whereas Tracy is moving and shaking and going somewhere. Yeah, it's that's why it's just so brilliant that they can put all that. Because normally in a different movie, you would expect the Jim character to horrendously change from moment one to the end, and he doesn't. I mean, he has his roller coaster moments and his failures, but that brim is still inescapable for him, and it's odd, you know.
Well, it's also just thinking about this as we're talking. You mentioned that he doesn't really change, and I wonder how true that, or maybe that's more true than we even know. Because when we pick up on this movie, he could be an unreliable narrator in a sense. Mm-hmm. That Agreed. Because at the end of the movie, he ends up in a teaching job with the Tracy Flick, and he's still having that, conflict. Like, anybody else want to answer this question? Mm-hmm. How many times has he been through this in his life? Like, by the time we meet him at the beginning of Election, has he been through this cycle like 2 or 3 or 4 times? He's just kind of trapped in this hell of mediocrity. Mm-hmm.
I believe that for sure.
Well, if he had that affair with, his friend's wife and left his wife, would he just have been then a teacher resenting his, ambitious students, but now with the divorce on his record and a mistress who maybe he'll leave if she's got an attractive friend? I mean, it's it's a weird spiral to think about. Yeah. Sort of. One of the things I love about this movie is it gives you opportunity to think about the inner and outer lives of these really rich, fun characters that,
Agreed.
It's an MTV production, but these are not one-dimensional like high school kids or teachers.
No, not at all. Even, and you're right, not a one of them. Like, Tammy Metzler wants to be the firebrand, but then in the end of things, just wants a good girl to love. You're right. The himbo that is Chris Klein's character, Paul, he does have that weird little, even if it's not fully formed, soulful edge where he's not total douchebag, bully jock. And then of course we've been talking about Jim and Tracy. So yeah, you're right. There's just layers, and I love that. So yeah.
I want to go back to Paul's parents. I don't know who the actress is who plays his mother, but Holmes Osborne plays the dad.
Yeah.
And he played a great dad in another high school movie that a lot of people are kind of divided on. It came out a couple of years after this, called Donnie Darko. Mm-hmm. And have you seen Donnie Darko?
Blind spot for me. I haven't seen it. I need to.
We got to talk about Donnie Darko sometime.
Okay, deal.
Jake Gyllenhaal, weird science fiction movie, high school student story. But same actor plays the father. Very different in terms of the delivery, but similar in terms of the expectation. Donnie Darko is more of a heartfelt kind of a character. But in this movie, you're absolutely right. He's probably a multimillionaire owner of a construction business, I think, is what we're led to believe. They got an impossibly huge, cool house, but he's not the rich asshole who's just like, hey, Teach, you got to pass my kid. He's not very bright, but whatever. When there's that great restaurant scene where Paul introduces the parents to Mr. McAllister, the one who inspired him to run for office in the school, they're so appreciative and into it. They're like, hey, why don't you come join us for dinner? And Jim is at a very particular place in his life, and he politely declines. But there's never that turn of like, oh, this is the dumb idiot asshole kid, and here's where he came from. It's like,
Yeah.
no, his parents, yeah, they're kind of overbearing on Tammy, but then again, Tammy, for reasons that are very valid, given the circumstances we talked about a little bit earlier, she's mad at the world and she acts out and she gets into all sorts of trouble, and they're rightly exasperated, but you never get the feeling that they're unjustly exasperated or going too far.
Yeah. You can tell those two parents are your pom-pom shakers. They're just, oh, good job, oh, keep going, but but like you said, not the overbearing dad who, like you said, my son better be the starter. My son better be the star quarterback. My son better be the president. None of that. Just like, hey, go on, have fun. You're fine. I'm going to go work on my study and golf a little bit. Like, probably detached, but not so detached that it's, bad habit forming, although I guess he's getting blowjobs in his bedroom and hanging out in hot tubs. So how observant and knowledgeable into things are the Metzlers. So yeah, they're your absentee cheerleader parents. That's a type for sure, but a type that's, you're right, not as nuanced as usual. So
And I think like Mrs. Flick, Tracy's mom, she's not, she's very busy, because you get the feeling that she's a single mom. I don't know if they ever talked about what happened to Mr.
I know.
Flick.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah.
So we'll just assume that she's a single parent.
Mhm.
She's supportive up to a point, but then there's that last scene where Tracy has lost the election, or so she thinks, and she's crying her eyes out on her bed. Her mom's trying to comfort her, and then as she leaves the room, she says something about like, well, maybe it was if you had just listened to me, or did did something wrong or whatever. Maybe if you hadn't done that. Very passive aggressive, and in that moment, you just get the lifetime of like, oh, that's Tracy Flick.
Mm-hmm. But without, like you said, without the extreme level, like, she's not a bitch on wheels.
Yeah, she's not mommy dearest or anything
No,
like that. Yeah.
no. Or the hoity-toity ultra lawyer person who's, she's not, none of that either. But you're right. Just enough passive aggressiveness to be, and all those background characters, like even Jim's wife, like caring, nice, but then it's like, fill me up. There's just enough dirt to kind of still be there. Or, or of course the Novotny affair, where she is wholesome enough trying to raise a baby, but at the same time, I'll entertain, boning my friend. It's still a very admitted mistake, and they have that, the girl to girl moment, like all that to ruin Paul, or to Jim, I should say. And but yeah, just enough there to be like, oh, okay, ooh, so just enough quirk in here. So so many angles of quirk.
Yeah, now let's talk about the actual election, because it comes down to, as the one kid says, a squeaker. It's literally one vote, and it's because Paul, again, just the really conflicted good Christian boy, refused to vote for himself because he wasn't sure if it was right.
And I love that silly monologue moment, because you're watching it going, what are you doing? And that's where the voiceover adds charm to it, because if you don't have that inner monologue, you're just like, boy, he's just plain straight doofus, isn't he? But no, like you said, the unashamed wholesomeness just squeaks. I didn't say squeaks, but just kind of oozes out, and that's a fun little silly throwaway moment. Again, not overly narrated, not lasting too long, but just enough to be like, oh, that's going to come back and be funny, isn't it? And it does. So
what would this movie be like without the voiceovers? When you were talking about that, I was thinking, if you took Paul's narration out of it, can you get the sensation that he really is an asshole? Because in one scene, his new girlfriend is hanging out with the sister, but then she's just, giving him head in the bedroom. He is, very popular, always surrounded by people. And then he's kind of got this thing in the voting booth where he's just kind of toying around with the names. I wonder if there's like a Blade Runner cut where you take out the narration and see if the characters play differently.
I think the character that I think would be more challenging, even though he's plenty challenging, is Jim. Like, the body language is all there about a guy who's really serious about his job, but there's enough, but we still, like, we don't get explained history. We don't see the explained home life. I mean, of course, his body language and actions, like going downstairs in the basement and put on porn at night, there's enough odd little things where I think his character would probably be more of a harder sell without the voiceover, because we would be like, wow, he's making a lot of really shitty decisions. He's kind of a dick, or like he can't be this, like we would be finger pointing like what a faker and a facade it is. But because you open on all of that optimism and the gumption about his job and the gung-ho-ness of what he is, thanks to the voiceover and a little bit of those montages, that those help. And it helps also that, let's be honest, it's Matthew Broderick. It's Ferris Bueller.
Yeah.
It like there's a lot of that's talk about just fate of casting, like, and such a fun reversal where if that's any other actor who we know to be a little shadier, and a little less Matthew Broderick, we would immediately just point and go villain of the movie, out and out. We would have the sympathy levels of little mistakes here, little mistakes there. We wouldn't grant it. But because it's Matthew Broderick, who we want to love, and it's because it's the optimism that's been explained and talked about so much in his monologue. Yeah, I think this movie gets. I know it's already a dark comedy, but I think it gets seedier and darker without it. I don't know. What do you think?
I want to ask you about related to this, to dig into Jim McAllister's character, because there's two flaws that I was just thinking about just now. I don't know if they're flaws or not, but First of all, who sneaks down to the basement to watch porn, or who just watches porn while drinking Pepsi? I understand that it leads to a great, plot revelation for him, but he's just sitting there in his underwear, just sitting there watching. Maybe he's just so detached from everything that he can't even be like, he doesn't even have the gusto to jerk off.
That's the thing. Like he's as if he's down there watching it for story inspiration, for a novel he hasn't written. Because, any other guy down there you're right. It's picking something stronger to kick it up a notch or slow things down. And there's probably a sense of urgency of like, well, I'm down here. It's on. Hey, let's go. You're right. There's none of that. That's how sad it is. Like, it's like he's watching it for the plot. As if that is an escape for him in Omaha, Nebraska. Who knows? It is odd. It is odd.
The other oddity, and I think it's great because it's a great callback towards the end of the movie. It's when in the opening scene, he's rummaging through the staff refrigerator because it's all full, crammed of stuff, and he has nowhere to put his bag lunch. Yeah. So he throws stuff out, and he's throwing this box of chop suey or something onto the floor. It misses the garbage can, and that's right when the janitor walks by, and we get that great look of like, you son of a bitch, you're going to make me clean that up. And that's what leads the janitor to, when he finds the paper ballots that McAllister, hid or, didn't count towards the end, threw them in the wastebasket. Janitor digs him up. Scandal ensues.
Yeah.
My question is, Jim McAllister, whatever we think of his character based on what he's doing with, his friends' wives, or he wants to do to students, I don't see him as the guy who's looking for a place to put his lunch. And then as he's leaving the room, because he can't avoid stepping over this chop suey. It's not like it flew into the corner or something. It's right in his path. I don't see him not picking it up.
Oh, yeah. The upright citizen of the school, he picks that up. He picks it up before getting the next dish. Like, as soon as it misses and hits the floor, oh, dang, let me clean that up.
Yeah, he is not we've got people to take care of that guy.
He's the overachiever. Yeah, there's not a chance he doesn't clean that up. Totally agree. So and it cooks him later, which is fun and silly. So,
yeah, I don't know. That bugged me. So, yeah, when we're talking about his character, I feel like there's a couple of instances where the movie isn't quite sure, or maybe that's just a plot device. Like, we have to get to this point B, so we gotta have a weird A.1 or whatever.
Yeah, that's the long game to bring your janitor with a great look back.
Yeah, but so let's
do politics here, huh?
Yeah, because. And I don't usually get into modern politics, even though that's ostensibly the point of the show. But I can't help but think that during the 2016 election, there were some memes going around about how Hillary Clinton was Tracy Flick. Whatever you think of her or not, watching this movie, that kept ringing in my head, and I kept seeing her doing all this stuff. And granted, a lot of our perception of Hillary Clinton is based on, media spin and stories and manipulation for the last 30 years.
And a PR department cultured expression, that those are calculated appearances, decisions, speeches, words. Like that's been well edited and well refined in terms of character that we see out there. Oh gosh, yes.
Yes. However, also supported. I think one of the reasons that has stuck around is that when you do get her on camera, she says, she calls half the country a basket of deplorables and that kind of a thing, So
yeah,
it's not like it's completely out there, unfounded nonsense necessarily. It's just there's just enough there that a certain segment of the population can think of her in a certain way. And unfortunately, when I look at the way that she performed and kind of carried herself in the 2016 election, this weird sense of like entitlement, and it, I think nobody saw it coming because she was going up against Donald Trump. And up until those election results started coming in, it's like, yeah, everyone had her at a 99.9% chance of winning the election.
Oh, I know.
But that's a total Tracy Flick setup. So this movie that's 21 years old, I know that the previous election was a few years ago now because we're running up on the sequel. It very much, this movie holds up. Even in the context of a high school election, it feels very much relevant, down to the two polar opposite candidates, the popularity contest, to the meddling in the system and the results and everything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's weird.
The three traits I keep seeing in this from a politics standpoint, and it, like you said, embodied into a high school level thing, but you can't help but go, man, we see a little bit of this everywhere else, is obviously chaos. There's a whole bunch of chaos in this, between just, surprise candidates, surprise swerves, double dealing this in little, just the competitiveness of the election, corruption. For sure. There's, Tracy Flick has her outright villain moment of tearing down her competitors' things. Jim's is easy in terms of fudging the actual votes. And then there's this is the strangest and hardest one, but there's a ruthlessness in this movie where, Tracy Flick, even when I love that scene with where McAllister brings her in for the posters, convinced she was the one that took them down. And that exchange is just like, because for a second there, Tracy's shitting bricks like she's going to get caught. But when needed to, when the pressure's on, she dials it to another level and puts the screws right to Jim in terms of, well, if you're going to do this and you're going to do this and you're going to do this, like she stands her lying ground so hard that it freezes Jim into place to the point where he does not have a comeback, and he's the adult. He's the one who is, ready to swerve what he can swerve or do what he can do, and is obviously at a tough place in his life. Or like you said, if he's been doing this for a long time, this can't be his first rodeo in terms of a Tracy Flick or a crazy election. But that's the girl that nails him to the floor and makes him speechless. I love that, like, empowering scene of revealed ruthlessness for Tracy Flick, where, because again, same thing without her voiceovers earlier in the movie, maybe you immediately paint her as just an absolute, walking, horror story, because I think her voiceover as well, like we said with Jim's, frames her as this, oh, she's just the goody two shoes. We've all met that person before, and the pressured mom and all that. Like, we're sold enough on the, oh, she means well. She's totally too much, but she means well. But that's the scene where you're like, wait a minute, she's for real, and it freezes us, and I love that.
Yes. I think the moment we find out she's for real comes much earlier in the film.
Okay.
But let's talk about this exchange, because one thing that I think it's important to hit on is the fact that, she corners Jim McAllister verbally with the truth.
Oh, yes.
Because she's talking about the inappropriateness of his actions and his friends' actions, and this kind of culture of like, guys really think that it's cool to, sleep with your high school students? Because
but
at this point,
spinning that to cover up her own lie.
Yes.
But that's the fun part is you can use a different truth to cover up your lack of truth, which we see time and again in the real thing.
Yeah, she's covering up for a falsity with the truth, which is a brilliant angle. Oh, yeah. But it's also, I mean, if you think about I don't know how old Matthew Broderick was when he actually did this movie, but let's just say this is 13 years after Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So let's say he's supposed to be 30 years old.
Yeah.
I imagine, because you look back on it now, there's only 15 years difference between between their ages. It's not like he's 45 or something.
Right.
It's no less wrong or creepy, but you can kind of get that feeling that even though he makes fun of his friend for saying, yeah, he's the guy who never really wanted to leave high school, he's not that far removed from high school or wanting to think he's cool and young still, that he can get away with this. But no, the thing that struck me at the beginning of the movie, when Tracy talks about the affair from her perspective, is she's not a victim. She does not count, even though the law, and particularly nowadays, everybody else in the world would say she had no right, or she was in no position to claim that she had that kind of agency because she was only 15 or whatever, and this creepy old man took advantage of her, especially because they actually had sex. I don't know how many times or what the deal was, but she says, people are going to naturally assume that I was victimized, but no, I made this decision willingly. I was in love. She considers herself to be an adult woman who can't relate to any of the kids, these idiots around her. So you can almost see her latching on to, at once, needing the attention of this man, probably because she didn't have a father figure of her own,
right?
But also being this, squishy kind of teacher who's looking to recapture his own youth. So they're kind of fucked up in their own complementary ways. Yeah. And not to say that makes anything appropriate, but it's not the same narrative that you would see if this movie were to come out today, I'm sure.
Oh no, this movie's impossible in the Me Too movement, of post Me Too movement now. You couldn't do this. You couldn't in good conscience, or even in just good taste, make a girl like that be completely at peace with having something wrong happen to her. We couldn't get that movie made today. Could not. No way. Hillary Clinton and all. Yeah.
Well, I think because a lot of people, possibly rightly so, would see that as sort of a destructive message. Like, is this sending the message to 15-year-old girls that if they have an experience with an older person, a teacher or an older classmate, that they somehow wanted it, that kind of a thing, or that they wanted
if you loved it, that would be a backward step. But at the same time, like, I like how this movie doesn't care. I guess I have to ask, who wins here? Jim. I guess Jim wins because he wasn't, like we said, with the politics of a small town, he wasn't crucified and bounced out of his entire career. He was able to go to New York and do the curator thing and kind of eke out a semi-educational thing. Today that would be a background check, and he'd be bagging groceries like his buddy.
Yeah.
And then even Tracy Flick, like, if that were to all come out scandal-wise, not just the Novotny one, but even this election one, she'd even be a little bit burnt, where she probably couldn't keep quite the same momentum of future perfect success. Like, because you have to think she's an assistant to that senator at the end of the movie, like, a burgeoning politician of herself. And I don't know if that's not a skeleton in the closet where that would get completely torched. Where does she ever run for office? Like, you can't tell me, even for his own, madness, that a Jim McAllister or a Dave Novotny don't step forward someday on a Tracy Flick and go, oh, but I messed with you in the dark room, and let's let everybody hear about it and burn your reputation to the ground. Because then the Tracy Flick that answers, but I loved it and it was fine with me then, they would get burned to death now. So, oh man, I don't know.
Yeah, it's almost like, I know you ever seen the movie Heathers?
Yeah.
There was another great black comedy high school movie. There was talk for 2 decades about making a sequel to that, where there's a new group of Heathers on Capitol Hill that the adult kind of Veronica Sawyer would have to contend with. I almost feel like this is the prototype to that, because it ends in Washington. She's the aide to this representative or something. And it's very easy to see that kind of a parallel. I almost would like to see that sequel where these old stories come back, and how do you deal with that in this particular media age? I think Tracy Flick would own it, and I think she would just say, she might even claim, I might have thought or said that I was into it, but I was 15.
Yeah. the
how dare
spin
you,
would take over
take
into
the word of
her.
a 15-year-old girl, and
Yeah.
and you guys were kind of what she said to Jim McAllister about like
Mhm.
taking advantage of someone so naive.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's man, I kind of want to
She
see
would
a sequel to
she
Election, but it will never happen.
No, it'd be fun though. I tell you what. But no, I love the history of how like this is Barack Obama's favorite political movie, and
Is that
it was a
true?
it's a nugget I saw on the trivia section of IMDb, so it has to be true, right? Come on. But no, like what other nuggets were there? Like Tim Robbins was the original candidate to play what was a candidate to play Jim. But there you go. Like you cast a seedy, shifty Tim Robbins who's done seedy, shifty things, and we wouldn't be ready to hug and embrace him the way we would Ferris Bueller. So, and then yeah, I saw something where Witherspoon originally wanted the Tammy part and not the Tracy Flick part. Like, which I think I don't know, but I mean, not that she's not a very talented actress, but like I couldn't think of anyone at the time more plucky and perfect to do Tracy than because this is Reese Witherspoon 3 years removed from Fear, doing some of the more adult things on her own. Like she had come up like Walk on the Moon. She had that, that indie up and coming background and this was a logical place to show off her charisma and smile and lead where put her in the I don't want to say the dyke role, but you put her in the dyke role with the braces and make her play younger than she already was because she was 22 at the time and she looked plenty 22. Yeah, I don't know if that would work. So, this is a fortuitous collection of things that make this movie happen, which is amazing.
Yeah, I mean I'm just gonna pause and look at my phone for a second here because I don't have the actress's name pulled up right away. Oh, Jessica Campbell played
Yeah,
Tammy Metzler. I don't know what she's done or what she had done,
I,
but I think she's kind of like Chris Klein. She's a total discovery in this movie
mm,
because she does not feel like, not to say she's a bad actress, but she feels
mm,
completely natural in the role. Like
yeah,
I had forgotten all about the speech that she gives in that
me
auditorium.
too.
And talk about the parallels to today. There's the kind
Mhm.
of the spoiler candidate who gets up there and says, "Look,
Oh
both of
yeah,
these people are corrupt. None of this makes sense. Just okay, if you want to vote for me, my first act is to dissolve the student body
right.
and ensure that we never have to vote again." I mean, it's beautiful stuff, and it
Yeah.
got the same kind of reaction that you see this divided country. Like, yeah, throw all of them out. Congress is corrupt,
Hmm.
and who cares who's
Yeah.
president? That kind of a
That
thing.
that's been played then, and it would play today.
Yeah.
You know, and I that what's amazing to me is that follows like a deadpan hilarious Paul speech. The reading into the microphone really slow and like I love that moment because it's Chris Klein, untested actor, and like I'm convinced it is harder as an actor to legitimately look like you're playing dumb. Like I think it's harder to play dumb than it looks or it should be because like he has to get up there, show no emotion, look down and just read that thing straight up, not no embellishment, no actors flourish, no nothing. Come up off that mic and let the bad audio fade, and like just to time all that brilliantly and like I said, and sell it because Reese getting up there and nailing a perfect plucky speech, we knew was coming. But we didn't know how doofus Paul was going to get, and it's so funny. Like he doesn't even bother to adjust the microphone, just bends down low and tries, and then the firebrand comes out and burns it all to the ground, and just the collection of that big scene, and you have a gym full of extras there that how I don't know how you divide the takes and not have reactions and get that to work. It's just fun filmmaking.
Yeah, and about Paul, I mean, yeah, maybe it was just beginner's luck with Chris Klein,
Mhm.
but when he's reading that speech, there is nuance and performance in there. It's not just
Oh
straight
no,
deadpan because
yeah.
there are these moments of inflection that just make it even funnier. Like he'll
Hmm.
ask questions and then kind of like give rhetorical answers in the
Yeah,
middle of this monotone
but it's
that's like,
still downplay, downplay, downplay from
right.
everything else you tell the actor to do. Because what, 20 minutes earlier he has to do a blowjob face and sell that. So,
Yes.
like, and so like to get him to do that was, and a first timer at that was just brilliant, man. Mm.
Yeah. And then to see him, as you mentioned, in American Pie, playing a completely different kind of character,
Mhm.
the different star jock who's completely,
Yeah.
confident and will say the most unbelievable things to girls.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
But
man. So
I think. Well, I think this all the movie still, no matter what, like whether we're looking at it then or looking at it today, that I think the hovering clouds of topics is the idea of ethics and morals, right? Like that's the things the dartboard things that we're throwing our darts at with this movie, and where do you land with the big? Because I feel like those are the big topics, ethics and morals. I mean, we're talking about ruthlessness and corruption and chaos, but all in the voice of ethics and morals.
And literally spelled out in the film,
Hmm.
and a kind of a beautiful running joke that is left unanswered, like what is the difference between ethics
Yeah.
versus morals? I think they might have answered it, actually, Tracy Flick's response, but it's meant as a joke, so I'd have to go back and
Yeah.
study her answer to find out what the real difference is. But last thing I will
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
maybe you can speak to this as a teacher, I thought that scene in the classroom where Jim McAllister raises the question, what is the difference between ethics versus morals? And the
Mm.
kids are giving their different answers. And you
Hmm.
can tell that he's like, no, that's not it. But the way he deals with it is like,
Oh.
let's dig further, or
Oh gosh.
maybe,
Yeah.
or, kind of exploring and helping them along. Is that real? Because it felt real to me.
Oh gosh, yes, yes. Because you can't just go. Because if you go, oh come on, or you go, no, you can't. Yeah, you have to. It's called engagement. You have to. You gotta sell that moment. You have to go. Well, you're close. Could you do a little more? Like, yes, that is an absolute in the book move. I don't want to say in the book, but like a good teacher fosters conversation. A good teacher can take is the living embodiment of there's no such thing as a bad question. There's no shut the fuck up and sit down. No, 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 no. Like we're not supposed to do that. So we want to. Believe me, inside we're dying. We're like, because it's either I always my joke with my coworkers and peers is like either two things happen. It's either South Park eyes, if everyone just sits there and blinks, or it's your classic crickets, except for of course Tracy Flick. So no, you give every leading question and minor little bouquet of encouragement that you can to just be like, you're close, but no, maybe not so much that, but every day, every day we do that. Oh my gosh, every day do we do that?
Now,
Yes.
you've taught a lot of students over your career.
Mhm.
I imagine that as much as you got South Park eyes or crickets or Tracy
Oh,
Flick,
yeah,
there's got to be moments where there's the light bulb moment where the kid actually
yeah,
comes around and finds, like,
yeah.
actually discovers something.
It's the
I,
best
I,
part.
ma- I imagine, yeah, it's like getting a laugh for a comedian.
Oh,
Like you mentioned,
it's
that kind of
exactly
being up
that.
in front of people and getting
Yes.
reactions. But yeah,
It's exactly that. When you have those moments, it's called it's the light bulb. What the light bulb moment is the term for it. Teachable moment is another one where the script. If there is ever a script, or if there's ever like an objective you're trying to do, but if you got a moment where they're rolling and they're talking to themselves, or they're engaging, they're asking more questions, like they're digging deeper. I think the classic term that I'm supposed to say to sound smart is inquiry-based education, where they're teaching themselves from the questions they're asking and trying to figure out together with a little bit of guidance and some content around the corner. When those moments, bliss, absolute bliss. That's you said it. That's killing it on stage as a stand-up. That's a standing ovation of moment where yeah, yeah, like when that bell rings and you don't want it to end, you take that piece of chalk and you spike it on the floor. You take that marker and you chuck it across the room like I taught today, baby. Yeah, I got it. You know, you're just all the memes, all of it. Yes, it's the best. It's pure bliss.
awesome. Well, speaking of pure bliss, I've really enjoyed this look back at election, and a
Yeah.
look sort of forward, contemporary look at election too. Uh, um, so thank you very much, and
You're
I'm
very
glad that you
welcome.
got dressed up. And
Hey, it's been a while since I had to put the tie on with this e-learning here. They're lucky I put pants on, so this has been nice. Yeah.
I'm still not convinced you're wearing pants, but please don't prove it.
Well, thank you.
Anyway, Don, thank you very much, and yeah, we'll talk about something else soon, I'm sure, because this is becoming a regular thing. I love it.
I'm loving it too. Thank you very much, Ian.
Have a good night.